Coming up next, we'll be asking the question, why do white women consistently vote for Republicans and against their own interests? The conversation with my all-star panel is coming up on the other side. You don't want to miss this. All right, so you guys know this. In 2020, more than 50% of white women voters chose Trump, and that is after all the sexual assault allegations and the grab them by the not made for TV comments. And now, 2 years later, we're 6 months out from the midterms, and no matter how you identify, your civil rights are under attack. So I know I have been shouting from the mountaintops, what exactly will it take for white women to vote in our and their own self-interest? So I want to kick it off with you, because Republican voting white women, like we just talked about, most certainly helped pave the way for abortion rights to be obliterated. And white women have narrowly favored the Republican presidential candidate for the better part of 70 years. We just talked about the support for Trump in 2016 and 2020. That was not an aberration. That was a continuation of a long-standing pattern. So why do you think the bulk of this group stays loyal to a party that does not serve their interests?
Well, I think the first thing it's important to understand is that white women are the largest kind of race-gender combination voting bloc. In 2016, they were 41% of the electorate. That's a bigger voting bloc than white men. It's a much bigger voting bloc than black women, black men, Hispanic women, Hispanic men. So I think it's very important to understand that among this huge voting bloc, you kind of have to break it down into subgroups in order to really understand it. And the reality is that white women who have been able to enjoy the fruits of feminist progress, who have gotten higher education, who have been able to stay single for longer, who have been able to delay childbearing, who live in big cities, those women tend to vote for Democrats. They do vote in their own interests. What you see on the conservative side, women who tend to vote for people like Donald Trump despite sexual assault allegations, and do in fact vote against the interests of women more broadly, I think is a sense that being respected for being a traditional woman is safer, is better than having to kind of go at it on your own. I think there's a lot of affiliation with racial status. It is part of what grants, white women, whether you're liberal or conservative, a large degree of privilege in society. And there are a lot of white women who really want to hang on to that.
What do you hear when you're having these conversations? What kind of feedback do you hear from women who I would argue do not vote in their interests? And thank you, Jill, for putting that in context for us.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I've had a couple of hard conversations this week with friends, but I don't want to shy away from those conversations because they're important to have, and everyone is on their journey in a unique place. So I don't want to be an apologist for white women. We have a lot of growth to do, but at the same time, demonizing is probably not going to be helpful, as frustrated as I get even in my relationships. So I think one of the most powerful things we can do is talk about personal stories, and also not, have this divide about stay-at-home moms and working moms and women who have chosen to have children and remain single for longer. All this stuff, it creates strife where there doesn't need to be any. And this should be a galvanizing moment. This should be a moment for all women to come together. And we still have lots of differences. We have lots of places we need to listen to each other more.
So I hear Rachel's point, Lucy, and I'm so happy you're on set with me to have this conversation. And I know this may be an uncomfortable conversation for people, but we have to have it. So I hear Rachel saying we can't demonize, don't demonize women. I have to tell you, I don't know if that's my ministry, because when we talk about Republican voting women who are supporting candidates who are openly racist, who are openly sexist, who are openly misogynistic, who are openly xenophobic, I think that is an easy demographic to demonize. And so I'm curious, because you were once a Republican, you still talk to Republican voting women. I'm curious your conversation, because you and Rachel and Jill could probably have a better conversation than I would, because I don't always know how to meet a bigot or a bigot apologist in the middle. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, a real problem is that Republican women are in this mode, and specifically white women, where in a way they do benefit from the patriarchy, right? And so they are feeling or participating participating in the same kind of story of economic insecurity or, you know, a right or a privilege that they believe their white husbands and sons and fathers deserve is going to a person of color, right? So they have a stake in the old paradigm that is harmful. They also, at the same time, it's good to be a white woman because white women also benefit from the progress that Democrats have worked to assure for white women. And so I think that the conversation is going to change because I don't think it has occurred to white women. They have not for 50 years operated in a paradigm where they're coming for the white women too, right? And they're not just coming for abortion rights. There's a bill in Louisiana going through that would make it homicide to have a copper IUD, right? Or to have in vitro. Unfortunately, most voting blocs, especially white women, are motivated to vote based on what's happening to them, right? What it means for them. And life is pretty good for white women most of the time. Democrat in power, Republican in power, economy good, economy bad. They're really insulated relative to other groups. And of course that's not the plural of anecdote is not data. It's not all white women, but by and large, if we're going to generalize. So I think that women in households, and including white women in their households, they are the deciders of things for the family. And women also are motivated by being told, they're motivated by Republican messaging around, we want you to, you are going to make the best decisions for your family, right? We want to create a world for you in which you choose your children's education outcomes. You have, you know, this or that economic liberty. Democrats are not as effective at telling those personal stories to Republican white women. But this, I think, is really going to be a sea change because now Democrats can say for white women, actually, you have a liberty that is really, really at risk here. And Republicans are coming for you. So it bothers me because it's sort of cynical, and it bothers me because I would like white women to be able to vote for a cause greater than themselves.
Lucy just made some really great points there that white women, no matter your party, benefit. And so when you look at black women who are fighting so hard on the front lines of democracy, it's because we know up close and personal the harm that these policies can do. It's not my ministry to go out and talk to white women. It's white women's ministry to go out and do that.
Frankly, it's not really about abortion. It's about restoring the country to a land of traditional gender roles and traditional racial hierarchies. And that's a deal that conservative white women are willing to take.
And it's, you know, when we talk about things like CRT, I mean, it's white women upholding that. You know, when we say parents, the white is silent. It's white parents upholding that. And it's very frustrating.